Howdy my totally as always tubular gamers, and we're back with, you guessed it, another ranking video. And what do I have for you today? Today we're going to be talking Star Wars. Now you know Star Wars, your mom, your dog, your sister, your brother, your friends, your adopted friends, your goldfish, everybody knows Star Wars, especially once Disney got their hands all over it. Now Star Wars is no stranger to media, Star Wars is no stranger to video games. Today we're talking Star Wars video games. Now over the years there's been legit dozens of Star Wars video games, but we're not going to be talking about all of them today. I have not played all of them, but I can tell you what I have played. I have played all of the modern Star Wars games. That's right, today we're talking modern Star Wars games. Now, before you go, well, what is a modern Star Wars game? Let me tell you my definition. I'm sure there's plenty of different definitions of modern Star Wars, but I consider modern Star Wars the PS4 era and on. I consider it the Battlefront games all the way to now. Really all of the games released from the beginning of EA's 10-year exclusivity deal that thankfully is running out to now. But it's not going to be just the EA games we're looking at. Most of these are all the EA games, but there's actually been 2 LEGO Star Wars games released during this time frame that I will be including on here, so it's not just the EA games. And I know that a lot of Star Wars games have been re-released onto modern hardware, but we're not going to be including those. We really are just talking about the newer Star Wars games. One day, hopefully, I want to rank every Star Wars game, but I have yet to play so many of them, to be honest with you. But if that's something you want to see me do, you let me know down below, of course. So today we're talking the newer Battlefront 1 and 2, Squadrons, Jedi Fallen Order, the newly released Jedi Survivor, and of course LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens and LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. If you want me to talk about other Star Wars games, well, this isn't the video for that. We're going to be ranking them all, give them all a little review. I'm pretty excited that Jedi Survivor is now out, and you know, this is Star Wars. Naturally, there are a lot of fans and there are a lot of different opinions on it. So there might be some hot takes, there might be some takes you disagree with. Let me know down below, but before you roast me or call me a dumbass or whatever, at least tell me your favorite Star Wars game here. Now let's just get right to it. Like, share, sub, please sub, all that good stuff. Now out of all of these games, I wouldn't say there was really a bad game or like an awful game, but what do I think is the weakest of these games? And so here we have Star Wars Battlefront releasing in 2015, developed by DICE, published by EA. Star Wars Battlefront, it was a pretty big deal when it came out. The Star Wars Battlefront game series was really near and dear to a lot of people's heart, and they were rebooting it. Here was a brand new game. It was by DICE of Battlefield fame. Hopefully it was going to be just amazing. And you know, I was right there day one and all the hype with everyone else. I love Battlefield 3 and some of the older Battlefield games, so I was like, wow, this is going to be like Battlefield. It's going to be so much fun. I'm going to have a great time just like Battlefront 2 on PS2. And then it came out. Now, don't get me wrong, this game absolutely gets Star Wars in a bunch of different ways. The production values were amazing for the time. The game looked great. It really was true to Star Wars. I think that the presentation, the music, all of that was superb. But when it came to the actual gameplay, the modes, the content, and everything around that, I remember being extremely disappointed with this game. And I know that over the years they added more and more to it as time went on, but I just stopped playing pretty quick with this game because of how disappointed I was, and that feeling has never really gone away. Even all these years later, I just think back to just how disappointed I was with this game when it came out. One of the most obvious criticisms was that there was no single-player campaign of any kind, and I really disliked that then, and I dislike it now. There were these like missions that you could play cooperatively or offline, and these missions weren't all that bad. They were like okay, I guess, but I don't think they were a substitute at all. So the game was just multiplayer, and you know, they charged full price for it because of course they did. At least the actual gunplay was more than solid enough. I think the gunplay was actually pretty good in this game. Like, there's a lot of different Star Wars weapons, it all feels really nice, and I think it was a satisfying time. The gunplay, it was good. Vehicles were good too. I thought they all felt nice, and there was a decent amount of them. Now, when it came to the actual modes, though, and the characters and the maps, that's really where I got pretty disappointed pretty quickly, just due to the lack of them. For instance, I thought the map selection was just terrible. There was only like a couple maps in this game. There was like Hoth, Endor, and Tatooine, and that was it, really. And I was like, you're serious, right? There's no prequels, and there's only a couple maps. Like Battlefront 1 and 2 on PS2 had dozens of maps from different movies and locations. I was like, really? There's only a couple maps? Seriously? And I got pretty bored of these maps pretty quickly. Like, I wanted more. When it came to the playable classes, I think these were fine enough. There wasn't, a ton of options, but it was fine enough for what it was. But the hero selection, this was just bad. Like, there was a couple, standouts, of course, Luke, Vader, Leia, Boba Fett, the usuals, but if you wanted some of the weirder characters, it was all DLC. Like, I want to play as maybe Lando or Greedo or Chewbacca. Nope, DLC. And it feels like that was kind of the name of the game here, because if you want like the complete package at this point, or you wanted a lot more content, you had to pay extra for it. Just forget that you paid already $60 for this game, and now you got to pay even more if you want to get what is really the complete game. And I remember just being pretty mad after even like a couple weeks of playing this game. Like, there's just not a ton to this game, and looking back, yeah, there really wasn't. Like, it felt pretty bare bones. There wasn't a ton to it, and the DLC added really everything that should have been there to begin with. Like, don't get me wrong, I did have some fun with this game. The first like dozen times I played Walker Assault, yeah, it was actually pretty fun, and I do have some good memories with this game, but they just weren't lasting, and the game really just didn't last at all for me like other Battlefields have, where I've been able to play them for, I don't know, more than a couple weeks. The game just didn't last for me. Should you play it nowadays? No, I don't think so. And so here we have Star Wars Battlefront 2 releasing in 2017, developed primarily by DICE and put out by EA again. Now, Battlefront 2, they said they were going to rectify all the negative feedback they got from the first 2015 Battlefront. And did they? Well, you probably know what happened with this game. First off, I want to say that they did carry over the best aspect of the 2015 Battlefront, the presentation. I thought it was just as excellent here as it was in the 2015 game. They also did add a single-player mode. It was actually developed by Motive Studios, who would go on to do the Dead Space remake. However, I thought this campaign mode was really disappointing, actually. You play as a character named Eden, who's captured by the Rebel Alliance. They were selling it as you actually get to play as the bad guy, you get to play as the Empire. The Empire's kind of falling. No, of course not. You change sides pretty quickly, like almost within the first hour or two. You change sides, and you end up working with the Rebels and all of that. And the story, I thought, was just really lame, actually, in this game. Super predictable, uneventful, and just not very good. The actual gameplay, I think, was solid enough in the campaign, though, but it was only a few hours long anyway. But hey, at least they actually had something. I mean, they had something, so that's an improvement. When it came to the multiplayer, I will say they actually did address some of the issues I had with the first game. Like, they have a lot more variety in terms of the maps, the movies included, the characters, all of that. They did have the prequels. They even had some stuff with the Resistance from, like, episode 7 that nobody wants to talk about. But when it comes to the actual gameplay of the multiplayer, yeah, I think it was solid enough. It was improvement on the first one. Not only is there more classes and more depth, but I think the gunplay is just as solid as ever. I like how you can play as the battle droids. This is always fun for me. And I think that there's actually a good amount of modes. And unlike the first game, you didn't have to pay for all the modes that they added and all the DLC, because they did actually add a lot of DLC in this game. Free DLC. There's characters, maps, vehicles, all of that. They did add a bunch of different stuff. And, by the end of it, there actually was a lot of content in here. And I gotta say, if you were gonna play this game nowadays, you'd probably be decently impressed by the amount of content that the game has to offer. But, big but, like huge fat ass but here, there's a reason all of this was added for free. Do I even need to go into Battlefront 2 and microtransactions? You probably already know the story already, but just know that EA still probably holds the record for most downvoted post ever on Reddit, thanks to just how stupid the microtransactions were, like just how ridiculously awful they were. And I remember playing the game at launch and just going, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this? Like, this is just ridiculous. And in 2023, it's funny how games are still kind of doing low-key the same thing, where it's like, oh, you can grind hella, or you can just buy it with real money, or get time savers. Time savers, more like annoyance mitigator, seriously. Like, what the hell were they thinking with this game, though, and its microtransactions? These were just some of the worst that I've ever seen in a game. Like, it was to the point that Disney stepped in, like UK regulator, like actual, official law people stepped into this because it was so bad. Like, the microtransactions were just awful. And it's hard to ever forgive this game for that. Like, if you played it nowadays and didn't factor in the microtransactions, yeah, you'd go, wow, there's a ton of content here, and it'd probably place a little higher on this list. But I'm not going to do that. The game is cursed forever at this point with its microtransactions, and it's a shame because I think this game could have been way more than it is. Should you try it nowadays? I mean, if you want, I can't tell you how many people are exactly playing it online, though. And so here we have LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens releasing in 2016. Now I remember when this game came out, I was actually really excited for it. New LEGO Star Wars was based off that new movie Episode 7, which I thought was decent at the time. Nowadays I look back and I just laugh at the new trilogy, but I thought it was decent at the time. But you know what was more than decent was this game. I actually think LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens is a pretty good game, and it actually did bring a lot of evolution to the LEGO format. So, like the title implies, the game goes over The Force Awakens in its entirety. It does also go over Return of the Jedi a little, and in between as well, which is pretty cool. So, you know, they turned all of the movie into these levels, and I think the levels are actually pretty decent in this game. I've always liked the levels in the Force Awakens game. Like, I think it's good. And then the game has the open world that LEGO games were known for at the time, where there's a couple big open environments that you can explore to collect gold bricks, characters, secrets, etc. There was a couple different open worlds here I liked. I really did like the Jakku one. I thought this was decent enough. And I think the gameplay, again, there was some solid improvements on the LEGO format. I mean, if you don't know how a LEGO game plays at this point, well, take a look. I mean, it's really its own genre at this point. One improvement I remember getting actually pretty excited about was the game's blaster battles, where it would actually go third person and you take camera and like get into real battles. I was like, wow, they actually added this into a LEGO game. That's pretty awesome. They also added multi-builds, which allowed players to access various building options. You could actually destroy and rebuild stuff to get different outcomes, maybe go a different path of like a level. I actually thought that it added to the replayability here. I think these are decent improvements. You know, they weren't instrumental, they didn't change the LEGO game or anything, but I think they were decent improvements. The character roster, naturally in a LEGO game, very good. This game had over 200 playable characters, not just from, you know, like Episode 7, but they actually just had a bunch of different Star Wars characters. No, they didn't have all of the characters from the prequels and the original trilogy and all that, but they did have a pretty decent roster. Now at this point in 2023, where we have the Skywalker Saga and people want to forget about the latest trilogy, this game, it's probably a bit forgotten, and that's a shame because I actually think that it was one of the better LEGO games at the time, and it's one of the better LEGO Star Wars games. I still had a lot of fun with it. I still think there's fun to be had with it today. If you like the LEGO games and for some reason haven't tried this one, I totally think it's worth trying, as the game does have a bunch of merit, and yeah, it is based off Episode 7. It is primarily based off Episode 7, and if you really hate Episode 7, you're probably not going to like this game by default, but if you want to just give this game a shot, I think it's worth giving a shot. And so here we have Star Wars Squadrons releasing in 2020. Now, I didn't play this game when it came out. It kind of just came out of nowhere and went, and I didn't try it until it was free on Plus. But I gotta say, Star Wars Squadron, this game's actually pretty decent to good. This game really is a modern Star Wars flight game. Despite the name, the game really is not at all like those Rogue Squadron games from like the GameCube and the 64. This is a lot more like X-Wing or TIE Fighter from like, you know, way back in the day. This game is much more of a space combat like flight simulator versus those more action games like Rogue Squadron 2. The game, I remember, was not released at full price, but it did boast a single player and multiplayer mode. I can say the setup though for the single player, it really wasn't anything special. It was actually really vanilla for Star Wars and really just, you know, pits the Empire against the New Republic. Like, I didn't think the story was anything special in this game, and I was just kind of like, yeah, this is a bit generic even for Star Wars. I really thought it was lackluster, and in between the missions, I was left with monologues which were pretty snooze-inducing. But you aren't here for the story, you're here for the dogfights. That's what you really want to see in a game like this. You want to see some intense, awesome, difficult dogfights, and you know what? This game actually delivers in that sense. The dogfights are pretty fun and immersive in this game. In fact, these are some of the most immersive dogfights you will find in any Star Wars game. Like, some of these get really intense, there's a really high attention to detail with the ships, and yeah, these are actually really fun. Naturally, there's a couple ships for each side faithfully recreated, and you can even customize the loadout, adding some strategy to it. This game has some really great moments to it. Like, there are a couple missions in the single player where I'm just like, wow, this is actually super fun, this is really engaging, it's challenging, and there's a bunch of different ways you probably could have gone about it. It's got plenty of parts that actually are quite engaging. However, I'll be the first to say there are plenty of parts to this game that are nowhere near as engaging as the dogfights. In fact, I'd say when you're not in the dogfights, the game is just nowhere near as fun. When two ships are really just going at it and it gets intense, that's when the game's at its best, and when it's not doing that, yeah, it's not as fun. The campaign, it isn't the longest, but it kind of feels like it goes on a little too long and gets old by the end of it. I don't know, maybe that was just me. Despite liking it and thinking the campaign was pretty good, I wouldn't say it was one of my favorite like Star Wars campaigns in any game, or even my favorite in a ship. I mean, maybe it's just me, but it didn't keep me as engaged as, say, Rogue Squadron did. I love those old Rogue Squadron games, and this is a different kind of ship game, yeah, but I don't know, I just love Rogue Squadron, man. Maybe that'll be my next ranking video, all the Rogue Squadron games. Anyway, this game, it did have multiplayer as well. They did add some stuff to it later as well, but I never really got the chance to get all that into the multiplayer. It seemed fine enough, and I know that my friends had a bunch of fun with it, but I just never really got to play all that much of it. I will also add that I was playing with a controller. I think this game is probably much better with a flight stick or the mouse and keyboard. The controls can be a bit awkward, especially at first, and take some time to get used to, so there is that as well. But all in all, I would say that Squadrons is still actually a good game. I'm a bit surprised EA actually put this game out still, like it just doesn't seem like something they would do. If you want to play a modern space combat Star Wars game, obviously this is the one to play. Would I rather play X-Wing, TIE Fighter, Rogue Squadron? Maybe, just maybe. And so here we have Jedi Fallen Order, developed by Respawn and put out by EA in 2019. This game was actually a pretty big surprise. I did not get this game at release. I was burned by Battlefront. I was like, I don't want any more EA Star Wars games, but after good word of mouth and borrowing it from a friend, I was actually really surprised with this game, and I was really delighted with it. It really reminded me of the 2000s, where we would get awesome standalone Star Wars single-player games that were just a ton of fun and really expanded the lore of Star Wars, and this game, it absolutely does that. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, you probably already know at this point, but this game kicks some ass. The game also had a pretty good story. It takes place in between episode 3 and 4, and it stars Jedi Padawan Cal Kestis, who becomes a target of the Galactic Empire and is hunted throughout the galaxy by these Inquisitors while he's trying to still complete his training, reconcile with his, well, troubled past, and rebuild the Fallen Order. I actually thought that the story was really good in this game. I thought that it told a pretty good tale, and it actually added to the Star Wars universe, and I think that all the new characters were more than solid enough, especially Cal. Cal was actually pretty good, a likable new protagonist in Star Wars. Who would have thought? But no, Cal was actually cool. I think the story and characters are pretty solid. Oh, and BD1 is just great. Like, I always really love little robot companions like this. This is just great. It's probably why I love Star Wars so much, but BD1 was just adorable. Now, when it comes to the gameplay of Jedi Fallen Order, it's kind of a beast in its own right. It's a bunch of different genres coming together. Part of it's like a Souls-like, part of it's like a hack and slash, part of it's like a platformer, and then there's even some Metroidvania elements in there as well. You play as Cal the whole time, and he is a Jedi in training, but when you start the game, you're kind of weak as shit. Like, as you go through the game, you learn new abilities, you learn new lightsaber techniques, and you get a lot stronger. The combat in this game, I'll be real, yeah, it is very similar to Dark Souls, not only in how it looks, but how it feels, how methodical it is, and it does have a Star Wars flair. Like, you can deflect blasters, you do get to use the Force, and there's a couple different other techniques in there that makes it different from, say, Dark Souls. But in terms of how the combat feels and how it plays out, it is very similar to that. I've heard people call this baby Dark Souls, and you know, I mean, they're not totally far off. I'm not going to be that guy who calls every combat that's like this like Dark Souls. It is definitely more of a hack and slash, but it does have elements of a Souls game. Like, you lose a ton of experience, basically all your experience when you die, and you have to go attack the enemy that killed you to go get it all back. Yeah, that's pretty similar to Dark Souls. But I think the combat, again, does stand on its own, since it does have enough Star Wars flair like the Force and being able to deflect the blasters and all of that. I think that it does have enough flair to stand on its own, and I think it's pretty decent. Is the combat amazing in this game? No, I don't think it's absolutely amazing, and I don't think it's the most satisfying. Sometimes it is a bit floaty, and the animations can be a bit weird, but I still think it is pretty solid. But the combat isn't the only thing you're doing. This game actually has a ton of platforming and exploration to it. The game is not an open world, it is rather linear for the most part, but there still is exploration here, and there's a lot of platforming. The platforming, I'd say, feels very similar to, say, Titanfall, which was developed also by Respawn, and I mean that in the best possible way. It's very fluid, it feels nice, and as you progress through the game, you get more abilities to make the traversal even more fun. I know some people didn't like how much platforming there was in this game, but I actually really liked it. I thought it was pretty enjoyable, and I thought the exploration was pretty decent. Also, there are some Metroidvania elements thrown in here with the levels, as well as you can come back with new abilities, and there's new paths and new secrets to find, whether, you know, it's upping your permanent life force or anything like that. I actually, again, I like the exploration, I like the Metroidvania elements, and I think that the gameplay actually comes together for a really solid gameplay loop. I think the pacing is actually really well done in this game, as it has you going from location to location at a pretty decent rate, and the story keeps going, especially by the end when it's like breakneck. And I think that the game has a good amount of environments to it. Like, you explore a couple different planets, they're all pretty fleshed out, and again, yeah, the game is really linear for the most part, but I still enjoyed it. And the game looks great too. Like, this is one of the best looking Star Wars games, period. I think it looks actually really good. I don't really have much to complain with Jedi Fallen Order. I think it is actually a pretty good game, and it's one of the best Star Wars games in the last like 10 years, easy. If you like Star Wars at all and haven't tried this game, I don't know what you're waiting for. It is dirt cheap. Just go out and try it. Really, just give it a shot, because it's actually pretty good. And here we have the recently released Jedi Survivor. Now, I was pretty excited for this one. Jedi Fallen Order was great, so naturally the sequel I'd be excited for. I played through this game on PS5, I will preface, and I gotta say I actually thought it was really great. I will just address the elephant in the room. I know the PC version is atrocious, and on the PS5 I did have a number of times where I had some frame rate issues and some stability issues and a bunch of graphical and non-graphical glitches. I will say it is not the most polished game, but it was not the worst either. Oh, and there was screen tearing on performance mode, which is weird. A screen tearing on a PS5 game, seriously? Anyway, aside from that, let's go over the game. So, you play as Cal Kestis again. Now, this game takes place many years after Jedi Fallen Order, and really sees Cal on the run still. He's trying to just really go at the Empire, and the Empire's certainly trying to go at him. The story is actually great in this game. I really like the story. I really like Cal again. I like all the other characters as well. The way they progress, everything is great. The way the game continues on, the pacing's really well done. Like, it's all just actually really engaging, and I really wanted to see what would happen pretty much right from the get-go. I got some high praise on Star Wars. I think this is one of the better Star Wars stories in a game in forever. It's better than even Fallen Orders, and it's like Fallen Order was great too. It's really solid. When it comes to the gameplay, it's a pretty big evolution, honestly, on the first game. Now, there's a number of similar elements. Like, I'd say the overall gameplay loop isn't that far from the first game. You know, there's your Dark Souls-esque combat, which has really been expanded on in this game. There's a bunch of exploration, which has also really been expanded on. Some Metroidvania elements. All of the platforming and traversal, and then, you know, some light RPG elements are thrown in there as well to create an awesome experience, one that's even better than the first games. And the first game was great. The biggest addition, I'd say, is that there's really open areas. There are some, you know, really linear areas in the game. There's plenty of those, but there's actually some really big open planets that you can explore. Like, you even get mounts, like, they're so big to explore, and there's side quests, there's things to go find, whether it's all the customizable stuff or, you know, like extending your force, getting these perks, or finding the ability to get more stims from BD1. These areas are actually really huge, and it was really cool to explore them. I really wanted to see what was all over the place, and the game constantly rewards you if you go off the beaten path, which is always great. The game does have those Metroidvania elements, as you do get some abilities throughout the game, and you can go back to these earlier areas and find new things. It's never really required, and backtracking is never absolutely required, but it's something you can do. When it comes to the actual traversal in this game, I think it's even better than the first game. Starting you with the double jump and then some of the abilities Cal gets, like, it is so much fun in this game. It is so fluid and smooth. Like, the platforming, I actually really did enjoy it. I know, again, plenty of people are still like shaking their head at this platforming and all the traversal options. No, I actually really like it. I think it's really fun in this game. I love platformers, so of course I was going to love this, but I genuinely do think the platforming is really fun, and it's actually really good in this game. And then we have the combat, the big meat and bones of the game that isn't the exploration. The combat is definitely expanded on from the first game. It doesn't feel so Dark Souls-y, I guess I'll say. It actually feels like it's kind of its own thing now. It still does feel a little floaty with the lightsaber strikes. It isn't, you know, the smoothest, and the animations still are a bit wonky, especially with the big creatures. Like, the animations can get really really wonky and they'll just wipe the floor with you. But anyway, Cal actually has a bunch of different stances now, as opposed to the first game where you had like one or two. Here, you can have the lightsaber a bunch of different ways. You can have it Darth Maul style, you can have it dual sword style, you can have a gun and the lightsaber. You even get this giant one that allows you to do these big sword strikes like a great sword. Like, there's a bunch of different stances here, and they're all really different from each other, all with their own perks and skills, which is actually pretty cool, and they all have their own ups and downs. You do have the skill tree, and leveling up is similar like the first game. You know, if you die, you lose all your experience, you got to go get it back, and these skill points can be used for the stances, Cal himself, the Force. You do have a bunch of Force abilities in this game, like Confuse, Push, Pull, all of those, and I always forget I have the Force in this game. I swear I should be using it more, but you do have a bunch of Force stuff, and that's actually pretty sweet. Also, the combat, I think it's actually pretty good. It has a bunch of different options. Again, you know, it's not the most satisfying, and sometimes it can feel a bit less weighty than I'd like, but it's still actually pretty solid, and I really did enjoy it. And I really think that everything just comes together in this game in a really awesome way. Like, this game is actually a blast. I really enjoyed my time with it, whether I'm exploring one of the larger planets, getting into some fights with some stormtroopers, or messing with my skills to accommodate a new playstyle because I want to try a different lightsaber stance. Like, I actually really did like this game's gameplay loop. I thought it was actually really good. Now, I will be real, it was really hard to decide between this game and what my number one is. Like, I really have gone back and forth about it for the last couple days. I've really debated which one do I think is better, and ultimately I'm going to go with this game for number two, just thanks to kind of the unfinished state it was released in. But you know, maybe ask me in like a week and I could probably say that this is my number one. I'm just kind of flip-flopping about it, but my point is that if you're going to play this game, first off, don't play it on PC. Wait for that. But you should really go try it, honestly. Like, the game is totally worth trying if you like Star Wars, if you have a console, and if you like the first game. Like, it is a must-play if you like the first game, because I think you'll really enjoy this one also. I wouldn't say it's the best Star Wars game ever, but it sure is a damn good one, and I really would be curious to see how they not only fix this game, but potentially have a third Jedi game as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of my favorite games all year, stability and performance aside. You know, outside of Spider-Man 2, the best game of this year. But what do I think is the best modern Star Wars game that you could play these days? I think it's Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. I know some people might be pretty surprised that I have a Lego game at the top of best modern Star Wars games, but Lego or not, this game is just superb. Now, I've made it clear, I love Lego games. I loved them when I was a kid. I love them nowadays. And Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, it might be the best Lego game ever made, which is really saying something. I mean, the game goes through all 9 of the main Star Wars movies, and these aren't like 20-minute recaps either. These are pretty fleshed out, all things considered. Like, you really go through almost every major, if not every major set piece from each of these movies. Like, it's just bonkers. I will say, things are pretty brief in the story department. They kind of expect you to have already seen the movie. The game is more of a highlight reel in that sense, in terms of the storytelling, but you really do get to play all of the awesome set pieces from the movies. All of the iconic parts of these movies are here, whether it's fighting Darth Maul, blowing up the Death Star, the many fights of episode 3, or even Kylo Ren's box chest. They really have like all of the iconic moments here. It's pretty crazy. This is the most I've ever enjoyed 7, 8, and 9, even more than Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens. And one reason I did enjoy it so much is because this game is actually pretty funny. The game's making jokes left and right that Star Wars and non-Star Wars fans are going to find funny. Like, whether you're a kid or you're an adult, I don't know, this game is actually pretty humorous, and they made those later episodes more funny and kind of just poked fun at how silly some of them got. The actual gameplay, yeah, it is pretty similar to a Lego game. I mean, if you've played a Lego game, you're going to know what to expect with this game, but the game has a number of additions, like the combat, which has actually been revamped a bit. There's a lot more options in the combat. Sure, it is pretty button mashy and basic still. There isn't much to it, but there's actually options here. There's some different abilities you can do, and it's not just press square as fast as you can. There's a number of new abilities here that really take advantage of the Star Wars lore. Everyone can shoot from a third-person perspective rather than just designated areas like The Force Awakens. And then the biggest thing is just the scope. The scope of this game is absolutely massive. This is without a doubt the biggest Lego game ever made. It is one of the biggest games I've ever seen, period. So you've already got 45 levels for all of the movies, which is a ton of levels, by the way. These aren't super short levels, and there's a bunch of collectibles here as well. But there are dozens of hub worlds to explore. Basically, they took like from The Force Awakens, that kind of like small open world, and multiplied it by like 20. Seriously, there are so many worlds to explore in this game, and there's a bunch to see in these worlds, whether it's getting new characters, getting the bricks, the collectibles, the cheats, all of that. Like, there are so many collectibles in this game. It really is a collectathon, like, and it's one of the only ones in recent memory, and it's so good. Like, there's so much to do in this game. You could play this game for probably 80 to 100 hours before you got everything. Like, there's just so much to it. And these worlds, some of them are actually pretty big. Like Tatooine, this is actually pretty big. And there is a ton of stuff. You could spend hours upon hours exploring. And what's great is that these areas evolve too. They're not just static and the same the whole time. Like, you know, you come to Tatooine in episode 1 and it's all about pod racing and there's not a lot going on. You come back when it's episode 4 and all the Tusken Raiders are there, the Jawas are there. You come back to episode 6 and now Jabba's palace is open. Like, these areas actually evolve and add more and more as you play the game. It's pretty awesome. I actually really enjoyed exploring these open areas, more so than I ever thought I would. I was like, oh, they're putting so much in this game. I don't know how much of it's going to be like carefully curated, or if it's going to be like almost randomly generated, placed at random, just not really all that fun or engaging. No, this game, TT clearly did not get the memo, and they made all of it very curated and very specialized, and it's all different, and it's just all fun. It's pretty awful how much they had to crunch to get this game out, but like, the game is great. The game is just superb. Then there's the characters and the vehicles. There are so many characters in this game, more than any other Lego game, not even close. And there's a bunch of costumes for these characters too, like Luke has a bunch, Rey has a bunch. Not just the main characters either though. Some of the other characters have more obscure outfits. Like, there's a ton of fan service here. And then the vehicles, there's a bunch of vehicles as well, a bunch of starships you can fly in. This game just has so much going on for it. If you love Star Wars in any capacity, this is a must play. Whether you're a jaded fan or someone who loves the classics, or maybe you even like the new stuff, this is just a must play. And it doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're young, you're old, you're going to find enjoyment with this game. Sure, I'm sure there are plenty of people that have already typed it out or are going to tell me, oh, Lego's boring, those games aren't so much fun, you should have put like Jedi Fallen Order at the top. No, this game was the most fun for me. It was the most engaging, and I do think it is the best game out of all of these. It is just a superb game. Sure, it isn't the most in-depth. The puzzles aren't going to really tax your brain. The combat isn't going to test your skills and your reflexes. No, it's not going to do that. But what it's going to do is it's going to go through every single of the main Star Wars movies. It's going to make you laugh. It's going to keep you engaged. You can play the whole game co-op, and it's going to keep you playing for a very long time. If you at all like Lego games also and haven't played this, I really don't know what you're waiting for. I'm pretty sure it's even on Game Pass now. It's just a fantastic game through and through. I have no problem recommending the Skywalker Saga to really anybody who likes video games or Star Wars. Like, it really is just a must play, and it's one of the biggest games I've ever seen. It really is one of the biggest games I've ever seen. I think in the future, when people look at the best Star Wars games of all time, I think the Skywalker Saga is going to be near the top. Like, it really is just that great. And if you hate Lego games and you are mad that this game is up here so high and it's not Jedi Survivor or Fallen Order or whatever, well, that's unfortunate. Tell me down below why you think it's that one. I wish it was Jedi Survivor. I really do. But, you know, like I said earlier, they released it in that state, and ugh. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Have yourselves a wonderful day. Please like, share, and sub and all that. If you made it to this part of the video, comment cement is in what is used to make concrete. And see y'all later. Bye-bye.